Welcome in. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan for the Rivals Network, which means you can find us at michigan.rivals.com. For those joining us live right now, you already know. For those of you listening on playback, I apologize. I'm still shaking after that Tigers game. Kerry Bonds. Oh, let's go, man. So good. I forgot just how much fun playoff baseball is, man. Their best pitcher, the Tigers' best hitter, that crowd, it's just so good. Oh, what hasn't been good? Michigan football. How you like that? There's a transition for you. Look, we're heading into a bye week. We're halfway through the season. Obviously, coming off a loss to Washington, there's a lot to talk about from that game. We have another quarterback change. Some things we thought might change have not, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also a really good time to just kind of take a helicopter view. I don't know how much talk we're going to put into what should have been done. I think that's kind of irrelevant, but look, where is this team going for the rest of 2024? And more importantly, the Sherrone Moore era is in full force now. Continuation, continuity, all that stuff. It's over, man. This is a new world, and it's his turn to reshape narratives or allow this to kind of skirt off. So we're going to get into it. I'm joined as always by our Intel insider and publisher, Mr. Josh Henske. I got so much Tigers on my mind. I'm so sorry. What was Saturday like for you? I was almost too confident. No, I was not almost. I was too confident going into that game. I don't know what it was. I think I really bought into Sherrone and Kalel and the team really feeling like they got a wake up call from the end of the last game, and it just wasn't there, man.
Yeah, I mean that was a winnable. It still was a winnable game. I mean, if Michigan doesn't shoot itself in the foot multiple times, that's all that's left is a bloody stump of a leg because of the amount of times they shot themselves in the foot. That was still a winnable game. I mean, I don't think both of those teams that played Saturday night are very good. I don't think that changes much of what Michigan's season was going to be with a win either way. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not good. I mean, this entire program's got to look inwardly a little bit during this bye week and kind of figure things out. I don't think the coaching staff are putting the players in positions to be successful, especially on defense. I mean, yeah, granted, you had half the defense out Saturday, but that's no excuse. Just a lot of players in wrong spots, just self-inflicted wounds. Pretty much the exact opposite of what made Michigan so good the last couple of years is happening right now. And and you're seeing it. What's happening? They're doing the exact opposite, and then they're playing the exact opposite of what they've shown. So, yeah, I mean, the bye week couldn't come at a better time, I think, for us and for the team. So, yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm at. That's yeah.
Our guy Brock Heilig got to take the trip to Seattle and be at that stadium, which is a really cool environment, really cool game to attend. Obviously, probably not the game you wanted to watch, but tell me your initial thoughts here and maybe just your experience in general heading out to Washington for a Big Ten game.
Well, the experience itself was amazing. It was, they build it up as the greatest scene in college football, and it sure lived up to the hype. I mean, that was incredible. I wouldn't put it as high as the Rose Bowl, just because that's so picturesque and beautiful. And Washington was beautiful too, but it was really cool to see the sailgating and to have the stadium right there on the water. Just an incredible atmosphere. And for the first time for a game that I've ever attended, I don't think this is normal, the press box was open. It was an open air press box. And so we could hear all the noises of the stadium, which was really cool. We could hear how loud the stadium was getting.
That had to be nice.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the press box is actually a really bizarre environment because it's a working environment. So nobody's talking. There's the game is on screen for you to be able to watch replays, but there's no audio other than the referee calls. You don't hear anything. So it's kind of a bizarre way to watch a football game with, 70 to 100,000 people.
Yeah.
How was your view? I saw Angelique posted a picture and it looked like she was looking through like the lower deck of a boat window. She had like the most terrible view.
Yeah, I felt bad for Angelique because she did have literally the worst view of anyone sitting in the press box, I think, and it was unfortunate the way that things shook out for her. But my view was great. There was just one beam, kind of like at Yost, where if you've ever been to a Michigan hockey game, there in the press box, they've got beams everywhere. It's hard to see. She kind of got that treatment, but my view was great. It was such a cool atmosphere, and got to go down on the. I didn't go out on the water, but I went down to the dock before the game, just walking around the stadium. It was really cool. Obviously, like you said, Trevor, not the game that Michigan fans were hoping for, but it was absolute 10 out of 10 experience. I recommend next time Michigan goes out to Seattle, I'd recommend any fan to go out there and take that in.
Yeah. I'm a little biased. It was the first city we lived. I was Army brat, born in Germany, in Fort Lewis, and Seattle, Tacoma was the first area we lived. So, I mean, you always think of your childhood as better than anything, but I've always thought Seattle was just awesome. So, but yes, that the stadium and everything lived up to the hype. That's great. The team, the game. I mean, let's get right into it. Obviously, it's a slow start. Michigan's down 14-0, goes ahead. It's not a word. Goes ahead and makes the change at quarterback. Jack Tuttle steps in. Not a massive shock for our Maize and Blue Review subscribers. Josh Henschke had been talking about Tuttle's reps had been ramped up during the week. He was likely QB2 heading into that game. He traveled with the team. There's been some misconception from folks. I don't know if it's like a misunderstanding of what was said on air about Sherrone Moore's perception of Tuttle's injury. He has not been ready for weeks. That's not what he said. What Sherrone Moore said was, we've known for weeks he would be ready for this game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of people out there like, oh, why did they start him sooner? Blah, blah, blah. For those that don't know, Tuttle had a UCL injury, had a surgery. That's why he wasn't thrown in the spring. Threw a little bit in summer, some 7-on-7 drills. He's had a lot of setbacks where he could throw for a few days, had some soreness and tightness, and had to roll back. That's what he's been dealing with. This past week was the first week where he went full go in practice all week. Right? So you can't name him the starter when he hasn't even practiced the full week yet. So I think moving forward, at this point, look, we knew what the limitations were with Orji, Josh. We knew what the staff liked about him from a potential standpoint. If you're not going to give him the designed runs or allow him to keep on reads or not give him the receiver routes he needs to be able to be successful, he's borderline unplayable.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you knew what you were getting by going with Alex Orji. I look, it's not all blame on staff, right? He doesn't have the tools necessary, right? It's a fact. I really thought, Moore said, look, this is his team moving forward, going to implement some things, and they just don't. And honestly, even when he has run the ball, he hasn't looked as good as he did last year. Like, Tuttle made some good runs in this game, right? So I'm glad they made the switch when they did. They clearly went in there with a short leash, down 14, decided to go to Tuttle. We'll talk about this in a minute, some of the progression that happened with Tuttle throughout the game. But man, there's no denying it. There was a little bit of a spark when he came out. He definitely seemed more in control of the offense early. He was making some pre-snap adjustments and communication, going through some progressions earlier. It feels like we're on QB number 3 at this point, going into the bye week.
Yeah. yeah. Third QB. I mean, he probably would have been the QB if he was healthy at this point. I think that was pretty much the case the whole time. And then obviously the setbacks happened, and that kind of made them reverse course and kind of hoped that Orji would be, a serviceable starter. And, that just didn't happen. So, I mean, I guess if there's a good thing about any of this, and it's a very, very small good thing, Michigan showed signs of life on offense. They could run the ball when they decided they wanted to run the ball against Washington. I mean, I thought that run by Donovan was the direct evidence of having a quarterback that can move the ball better than what they have been. You've actually now got somewhat of a threat of a pass. So now, the defense has to play honest. And I think that they kind of caught Washington off guard. And the just looking at Scar's film review today, it just wasn't a good play defensively either. So, there's a couple of bonuses there, but yeah, I mean, look, you can't keep doing this musical chairs with quarterbacks. I mean, we said this before with Orgy. We said it with Davis Warren. At some point, you kind of just have to put up with whatever you get. And I think, at this point, I don't know what Tuttle did in comparison to what Davis Warren has done in the past that's any different. I think maybe Tuttle was probably more decisive in his decisions and his passes, which probably will give him the upper hand. But if you're going to get turnovers, if you're causing turnovers, I mean, 2 big turnovers were on Tuttle, directly on Tuttle, that really put this game out of reach for Michigan. You're just going to have to deal with it. I mean, you have to either you stick with Davis Warren, who turns over the ball, or you stick with Tuttle, who turns over the ball. So, I think from an experience standpoint, Tuttle gives you the best, whatever it is you want to do on offense. I don't even know what you want to call it. I mean, I just don't think this team has an identity at all on offense, except just hoping the run works, and that second half, I don't know what they were doing running the ball. I don't know what they're doing most of the time this year, to be honest with you. But yeah, look, you just got to stick with one guy. This revolving chairs of quarterbacks is just crap. You can't do it. And you got to stick with Tuttle for better or for worse, and just kind of see what happens. Would you have liked to have seen him without the defense spotting the offense 14 points? Yeah, I would have liked to have seen what Tuttle could have done at a 0-0 ball game. But yeah, I mean, look, you're not fixing this passing offense. Maybe he puts the receivers in better positions to make plays, but yeah, I mean, it's not good right now, obviously, and it's not going to be good this year. I mean, it'll get better, but with the floor being so low, you kind of have to be better by default just because you have to be. So, yeah, there's issues that need to be addressed in the offseason, no doubt. Top to bottom, I think a lot of it needs to be addressed. So, yeah, that continuity talk is long dead and gone now, and you have to figure it out or you don't. It's either that, the 2 options: you figure it out or you don't. So
I got a lot of stuff I want to frame around the Tuttle stuff, but I'm sure you have a lot of your own thoughts, Brock. So you go ahead first.
I was just going to say that game was probably the most roller coaster up and down type of game that we've seen since maybe TCU, honestly. Like that was like Washington started out way on top, and then Michigan came back and put up 17 points, and Washington came back and took the lead back and ultimately won the game. But as it relates to Tuttle, I mean, it was pretty crazy. His first 3 drives, if I'm not mistaken, were 17 points: touchdown, field goal, touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all 3 really great drives, and Michigan was looking really good. And then the last 5 drives of the game, I think they had 39 yards on 21 plays, and with 2 turnovers, obviously the 2 from Tuttle. And at this point in the season, you're halfway through, 6 games in, 6 games left, and in my opinion, I think the 6 upcoming games are harder than the 6 games that you've already played, right? Or yeah. Oregon's the 3rd-ranked team in the country. Ohio State's the 2nd-ranked team in the country. You've got Indiana and Illinois on the schedule. Michigan State's not a pushover. I'd say Northwestern's the only game that you're looking at a guaranteed win. And, it's tough for Michigan. They've had 3 different guys try out at quarterback, and it doesn't seem that any of them have worked. Obviously, Tuttle probably had the highest performance of any of the 3 with those 3 drives against Washington, but it's really not looking good. I use this analogy in a tweet on Saturday, but it's like Michigan's taking a test and there are 3 multiple choice answers for the question, and none of the answers are right. And
that's fun.
They're it seems like they're set up to get the question wrong. Orgy's a good Orgy is perceived to be a good runner. I thought it was kind of ironic that Tuttle was in the game for probably no more than a couple plays, and he had 2 runs better than anything Orgy had done all season. But Orgy is the athletic guy, Tuttle's the experienced guy, and Davis Warren is maybe the best passer, I guess, most accurate passer. But none of them are really the whole package that Michigan is looking for. And so at this point in the year, I would say there's not a lot of hope for the second half of the season.
And the part of this I want to talk about, and this isn't, none of it's a negative shot at Tuttle per se, but throughout this whole season, early in the year, I was labeled like I was this huge Davis Warren defender, right? And that I was covering up for Warren and blah, blah, blah. And my argument was the issues on this offense, he's so low on the totem pole, from the issues on the offensive line, the usage and routes and separation with wide receivers, the formations on third down, the play. Like, there's just so many other things. I'm like, I don't care which quarterback you put back there. I felt, given the situation, Warren did pretty good. Now, look, all we have from Tuttle is what, 2.5 quarters at this point, on the road, down 14, tougher opponent. So it's not apples to apples right now. But Davis Warren completed 67% of his passes. The problem was, it was like almost every incompletion got picked off, right? I think what we saw when Tuttle first came out there was the poise, was the control of the offense. We saw him going through these progressions, right? And as the game went on, he started to get impacted by the issues of this offense, right? The protection started getting to him. On that fumble, he bailed out of a clean pocket. Yep. He saw the guy come around Link and just assumed this dude's coming, and he took off, right? He could have stood in there a little bit longer, but he initially had some really good pocket presence, started to get a little sketchy back there, right? He's making really good reads and progressions early on. The longer the game goes on, he starts locking on to Colston Loveland, who is clearly Michigan's best receiving target, right? I've posted this on Twitter. I'm sure people have seen it. That third down pass to Amorian Walker, which was arguably the best pass we've seen from a Michigan QB all year, right, was the only throw to a receiver beyond the line of scrimmage in the entire game. Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan both had targets behind the line of scrimmage. Everything behind the line was either to a tight end or a running back. So he's standing back there. Receivers aren't getting open. He's going through progressions. The pressure's coming. He starts locking onto Loveland. The first out throw he had to Loveland was good, but it was a little bit behind him. The second time he goes back, defender knows that Tuttle's not throwing it to the sideline. He jumps the route. He's locked onto Loveland the whole time, right? And this is where my concern comes in with it doesn't matter which QB is back there. If you're going to continue to not put tight ends in line to give them more protection, if you're going to continue to even on the Walker play that was good, they went 4 wide again. No extra pass protection. That was probably the best pass pro we've seen on a third down all year, where Tuttle was actually able to stand back there for a little bit and deliver the throw. But how many times have we seen Orgy Warren get sacked as soon as they're at the end of their 3 or 5 step drop because they have no protection, right? Even the touchdown he threw to Loveland, he misses Marlon Klein, open coming across, threw across his body to get the end zone. You take a touchdown over not, but like you start to see these bad behaviors come out, right? To, I don't want to say Warren's credit, but something to talk about. Yes, the 6 interceptions, massive. That's why he was benched, right? But 3.6% of Warren's throws were deemed turnover worthy plays, right? Where basically his throw put the ball in position for it to be a turnover. A few of those interceptions weren't his fault. Tuttle in this game, where'd it go? 9 point something. Where did it go? Sorry. 9.1% of his throws, 1 out of every 10 throws. And again, real early, only against Washington, long way to go. But Tuttle's previous experience at Indiana starting, he turned the ball over as well. So to Josh's point, you pretty much have to accept turnovers are coming at this point. But I mean, just from the eye test, it felt like it's got to be Tuttle. I don't know how you go back to Warren at this point. I don't know how you go back to Orji. I've thought you don't. You just don't.
You can't.
Yeah.
And look, Jaden Davis traveled for this game, which makes me wonder if Tuttle got hurt, who would have gone in?
Yeah.
You know, and I know all the talk about whether it's his red shirt or, you know, preserving this year and you know, not wanting to be thrown into a tough situation. But at some point, I don't know when that point is. You play the quarterback that gives you the best chance to win this year. I've never liked the idea of like sacrificing a season, sort of whatever you want, how you want to put it. But look, Michigan's got to go in the portal next year, no matter what, probably to get 2 different bodies, whether it's, you know, somebody who's high end starter caliber or somebody who can come in and compete, another Tuttle like guy, whatever. You almost have to go to Jane Davis at this point and be like, look, I got to know what you are going into next season. Otherwise, I'm going to go in the portal and recruit over top of you. Right? Like, I don't know if we're at that point yet. You're probably still comfortable going through this bye and going with Tuttle, but like, you get a few more losses at some point. Don't you have to consider that? Like, we got to at least see what you can do, kid. You know, and maybe the decision is you can't do that because it could affect his development. I don't know. But I don't see Tuttle raising the ceiling any much higher than it's been already, unless Michigan now is like, hey, to Josh's point, this is a QB we think can run the offense we actually want to run. And maybe they start calling plays or doing things that benefit the receivers and the offensive line and the quarterback in general. But I just feel like this is who they are at this point, regardless of who's back there.
To be fair, that offense when Tuttle was out there looked the most like the JJ offense that they've had since JJ was there. I mean, that looked like last year's offense when it worked. Obviously, the fumbles.
I was going to say, to Brock's point, other than the touchdown to start the third quarter, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, 5-play fumble, 5-play interception, 5-play end of the game, and 39 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, this team is tanked in the second half offensively and defensively for multiple games too. So
yeah, I mean, that's when you fly too close to the sun, like they have the last 2 weeks, you're bound to get burned. And the second half again screwed them. You know, they were fortunate to get away with wins the last 2 weeks in the second half, but yeah, I mean, you can't keep doing that second half performance and expect to get wins, especially when they weren't playing with a lead. You know, it was basically, you know, essentially 0-0 heading into the second half. So, yeah, look, if you and I or if Brock had all the answers, we'd be getting paid millions of dollars on their staff to fix it. So, I don't, you know, the answer is that there is no answer. You know, you just have to see whatever this season is out. You have to see it out, and you have to hope that, you know, that they see what everyone else is seeing and make changes as necessary, whether that's, you know, spending money out of the portal. You know, I think Sherrone Moore will have a much more stacked deck in terms of hiring new guys, you know, than compared to doing it in January, mid to late January. Same with the portal. You know, he has a whole portal cycle to get through, and I think that's going to be the big, you know, the big thing of how I'm going to judge how this thing's going to go. You know, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for last offseason, but this offseason you can't get the benefit of the doubt. There's drama free. You're not going to have the NCAA investigation drama hanging over your head. You're not going to have the Willie won't he, Jim Harbaugh stuff going on. The JJ going to the draft in mid-January or wherever the hell it was. You've got a blank slate now to work with, and it's up to you to make changes. And I would be very disappointed if there was not any changes made from a staffing perspective or a major portal perspective. You need to add top tier guys. You can't add depth. So, well, I guess you can do both, but you got to add some top tier guys. You can't just get away with, oh, we're gonna get this dude from Division II to hope that he comes in and competes against whoever. And you're not even thinking about who might leave the program after this year too. Not even talking about the NFL guys. You're talking about transfer portal stuff. So look, there's got to be changes made. There has to be. This current trajectory is not sustainable. And I mean that's a fast track to the unemployment line. It's and you can't have that after 1 year. You got to have something to lean on. And I guess that's kind of what I guess they're hoping to find out here these last 6 games. But yeah, I don't know. Figure it out. Dip into the Harbaugh tree. Dip into the Jim Harbaugh tree. Dip into the John Harbaugh tree. Lean on someone. Lean on Bob Stoops. I don't care what happens. You gotta figure it out. Got to figure it out.
Yeah, I've got 2 main points that I want to touch on here, and one is more short term, one is more long term. The first one, the short term one, I guess, is, I mean, what you guys were talking about with the second halves. It's been 4 straight weeks now that Michigan has been outscored in the second half, and it would have been 5 if Texas didn't take its foot off the gas in the second half. Michigan outscored Texas in the second half. I think it was 9-7 or something like that. But I mean, they easily could have kept their foot on the gas and embarrassed Michigan even more. But 4 straight weeks that Michigan's been outscored in the second half, and through those 4 weeks, they're being outscored 70-33. I mean, they're getting more than doubled. They're getting doubled up in points in the second halves of these games, and it's just it's mind blowing. After obviously, Jesse Minter was the third quarter adjustment guy, right? He was known for making those third quarter adjustments, and Wink Martindale is not Jesse Minter, but to think that this program has fallen that much in just a year of complete dominance in the second half and in the third quarter, especially, to now being lost. I mean, they're getting outplayed in every second half, even against Arkansas State and against Minnesota and teams they should be, the boa constrictor mentality. They should be boa constrictoring these guys and sucking the life out of them. But instead, the script is.
Oh, they're sucking, all right. Just not in the way you want them to. Just not in the way you want them to do it.
Yeah, and I mean that's a huge area of concern. Just looking at some stats this season. I mean, 70-33 in 4 weeks, and then the more long term concern for me is I was thinking I had a lot of time to think flying home from Seattle and with the flights and everything. I mean, this team is 4-2 through 6 games, and I think we all agree the best possible scenario at this point is 8-4, and I don't think anyone could see this team going 9-3 or even 10-2 at this point. 8-4 is the best this team could do. What's it going to look like next year when you lose Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart and Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mullings and Colston Loveland? I mean, you're going to lose at least 7, 8, 9 of your best players. And from an 8-4 team, I mean, what's it going to look like next year? I don't care how hard they hit the portal, how much they change with the staff. I mean, it's shaping up to be a very, I almost want to say talentless roster next year. I mean, if this team is 8-4 what's it going to be like next year when you don't have any of your best players?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because in this era, I mean, we're talking about an Indiana team, for instance, that's on the schedule this year that might actually probably will be favored at this point in that Michigan game that was able to turn a roster over in the portal. I think the one I want to backtrack on some stuff, but I want to hit this point while it's at the front of my mind. I think the one difference Michigan is going to have in the transfer portal this year versus previous years is they're not going to be just selling a chance to compete anymore. Like, you're going to come in and play. You know what I mean? Like, in the past, it was kind of limiting because you had to try and go out and get dudes who are maybe willing to fight for a year, like a Josiah Stewart, who was taking a step up from a Coastal Carolina, knew he was going to be in a rotational role, and then the next year would have a bigger job, right? Where all these offensive linemen that you brought in, that it's like, hey, but you're going to compete for a job. Well, that's not going to be the case next year, right? These dudes you're going to go after are going to play, right? So I think that's going to help from a portal standpoint. I do think the class, I'm still really optimistic about the 2024 class. I don't know if befuddled. We've talked about the rotation and the depth usage all year. It makes no sense to me from a this year standpoint and a next year, because I kept telling people, and like your point, like, well, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant leave, we're going to have nobody. I'm like, well, yeah, you're saying that now, but you haven't seen Enoetta play yet, right? We felt that same way until Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant started, but you haven't seen the new guys play it. Well, the new guys aren't playing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, they're not using this depth to get these guys experience like they have in the past. So it's hurting this year. And it's also like, man, we're not really getting a good look at what next year could be too. But since we're kind of on it, I mean, we can get into some of the defensive numbers from the game too. But I mean, the theme I put in there, the no continuity starting over. And to Josh's point about a benefit of the doubt, I think, obviously we all have the benefit of hindsight now, but Sherrone Moore was put in an incredibly difficult situation from the standpoint of, congratulations, you're the head coach, but we're going to handcuff you and put this giant continuity umbrella over you. And it's going to shape almost every single thing you do in terms of building this staff, right? To his credit, Ben Herbert, Mike Elston, and Steve Klingscale are three guys who not only were expected to stay, but at one point told players they were staying, right? Those were guys that weren't going to leave. That was part of this continuity thing. And, Jim Harbaugh obviously goes all in on Ben Herbert, gets him to change his mind. Harbaugh swings and misses on a couple guys at the NFL level and circles back on an Elston and a Klink. Elston, a guy who, again, the day before he left, was literally about to get a defensive line commit, was extending offers. The guy was out there grinding and working, didn't want to leave Ann Arbor. But hey, at some point, the idea of not dealing with the recruiting and having the freedom that comes with the NFL and not the NCAA and living in Southern California wins out. Klingscale, now that we know about potentially getting violations for helping a dude with Instagram, was probably like, okay, screw this. Right? Yeah. So he loses these guys. I think we've talked about defensive coordinator, regardless if Harbaugh stayed or left. Jesse Minter was gone. Like, I hope people realize Minter was going to the NFL no matter what. He was the most coveted defensive coordinator. All four people that Michigan had lined up in this Ravens coaching tree to potentially replace Minter got NFL defensive coordinator jobs by the time Harbaugh was gone. And this entire continuity thing and this pitch of keeping your players and the culture and everything, we had to do the Ravens scheme. We were demanding it too. I was demanding it too. And that gave you Cullen and Wink, because the young guys were gone, and Wink and Moore hit it off, and the players like Wink. And look, Wink's a great coach, dude. He has a ton of experience. He's a football dude. I get it. But it clearly wasn't the right thing to come in and try and use his system with the Michigan system, with different play. It's not working. Whether it's an NFL to college thing because he hasn't been here in a long time, I don't know. But the blown coverages, the late, like you said, the second half, it's all just completely the opposite of what the Michigan continuity was going to be on offense. When we see creativity, it fades away. It feels like every game you end up with 4 or 5 plays at the end of the game that they're just running over and over again. I don't know if you don't trust your players to run them. I don't know if you don't trust yourself on the call. I don't know what it is. Either one, it's coaching. Either you're not developing the players or you don't trust the player, whatever it is. And I think at this point, to Moore's credit, or maybe not to his credit, but what's fair to him into this offseason is, okay, trying to frame this as like continuing whatever we had under Harbaugh isn't happening. It didn't happen. It could have. Maybe you could have done something this year that would have made it feel that way. It didn't. This is your program now. And if that means changing coordinators, look, Kirk, obviously, I brought this up with the quarterback room. Jim Harbaugh needs to get more slack for what happened in the QB room. And bringing on Matt Weiss, who is a running back coach, missing on Dante Moore, missing on other guys, not making big. The only portal addition you made was Jack Tuttle. Like, that's on him too. You have J.J. McCarthy because Ryan Day told him no. And he comes here with a chip on his shoulder and wants to go get Ohio State. That's the only quarterback you got right. And you might not have got him if Ryan Day said yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's on him too, So, look, Kirk's landed Jaden Davis. He had them back in the conversation with Underwood, who wasn't even talking to Michigan anymore. I know he didn't come here, but he got the conversation going again. You like Carter Smith, right? We like Brady, but that's not going to help you today. You got to get there. You got to keep this bridge connected to get to those young guys, because I do think the 25 class can finish strong. I think the 26 class can be even better because of all the things Moore has done behind the scenes, enhancing the recruiting department, working with the collectives and the university, relationship, building in NIL dollars. He's done a lot of good things behind the scenes. I think he was handcuffed with the staff because it was late and because of some of the pressure put on us to continue things. I'm not calling for anybody's job, but I think he has to go into this offseason and say, this is my program. I have a year or two to fix this, so I'm going to make the decisions I want to make. And I think he should be allowed to do that. I know some fans are already talking about he's got to go. It's just not fair. I'm not going to go rehash why Sherrone Moore deserved this job, but he did. He did. And we are where we are. He's going to have the opportunity to finish this season strong. And then obviously this offseason is so crucial to your guys' point, because it's very easy to see it being worse next year from a roster standpoint. And there's just no way you're going to be able to have enough momentum into that third or fourth year after that. Sorry, that was a long rant, but
no, I mean, there's not much really more to be said about that. I mean, yeah, you nailed it, right on the head. So you just gotta figure it out. You figure it out or you don't figure it out. And we all know what happens when you don't figure it out. It's coaching search season. So, yeah, this kind of feels like an inflection point here. This is either the point where people start to realize, and I'm talking about people as in those in Schembechler Hall, realize that you got to start figuring this thing out, or you can't keep trying to force something that is just not going to work. So, yeah, I don't know what the magic answer is. Just got to figure it out.
Someone in the comments made a reference to Makari Page's comment about how Wink Martindale's defense is completely different than Jesse Minter's and Mike McDonald's, and I guess Makari Page was right. It is completely different. Do
you remember we talked about how weird those comments were, though, because other players said it wasn't different at all?
Yeah,
and we were kind of like, that's weird, but it kind of makes sense now, because Makari Page went from being the single high safety most of the time to lining up in the box, to blitzing, to being in man coverage a ton. And then meanwhile, some of the guys up front are like, nah, it's the same. I get moved. Mason Graham. Yeah. I get moved around a little bit, but otherwise it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it does make a little bit of sense now. And the results are definitely different. I'll tell you that. I don't know about schematically. I'm not that smart about football, but the results are definitely different. This team is not as good in the second half defensively, and they miss tackles. I mean, I don't know what was going on with the equipment on Saturday with Jair Hill.
The cleats were weird.
Yeah,
he slipped a few times, and Zeke Berry overran at least two two ball carriers there and whiffed pretty bad that I remember. But
Donovan fell too.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
he was trying to cut on his foot, which was probably a bad move anyway, but still, it was weird.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how much that played a factor, but I mean, just from the secondary perspective, I mean, Jair Hill goes and makes that great interception against Minnesota and has a great game. I mean, he played the best game he's ever played in a Michigan uniform against Minnesota, and then comes out and really struggles against Washington, and Zeke Berry really struggled too. I mean, it's a totally different defense. I mean, I know Makari Page was more talking schematically, but it is completely different. We were going in the season. I remember the three of us talking about how this defense could be better than last year's, and looking back on that now, it seems pretty foolish. But they're undisciplined. Everything looks completely different. They can't tackle. They overrun plays. They slip and fall. Whatever it may be, it's almost a train wreck. And I'm not going to be on here calling for anyone to be fired or anything, but I think you've got to look at coaching at some of this and not in the way of like calling for anyone's head in the middle of the season. But I mean, these are trends. And Joel Klatt said it on his show. I think he released it today. He said Michigan is just not a very well coached team, and they're very undisciplined. And you have to agree with him.
Just real quick, Calvin, you said Zeke and Jair should not be starting. Losing DJ Waller was huge. He's not even playing at Kentucky.
Yeah, he played. Let me read your stat. Read the stats here. 1 game started, 5 total tackles, 2 solos, 3 assisted, and 1 pass deflection. Yeah. So he's not even.
And Hill was the second highest graded defender previous week. It's been the inconsistency in the secondary. Yeah. And I think I was talking out loud in a Twitter space earlier, and I just kind of put these things together. I'm like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. Brock, you weren't on a lot of these shows, but Josh, when the staff was being assembled, the biggest thing I pushed back on was I really hated not having a corners and a safeties coach, and instead having the dedicated special teams coach and asking your new secondary coach to coach both. Now, we know Klink worked with both corners and safeties because those guys were asked to play both positions, right? Mm-hmm. But you also had Jay Harbaugh coaching safeties. And more importantly, Jesse Minter is a secondary defensive back-based coach. Right? So now when you think about what happened this offseason, McDonald was linebackers, okay? And we saw a huge secondary upgrade under Minter. So you lose your defensive coordinator, whose strength is in the secondary. You lose Steve Clinkscale, who is, I mean, I don't even know if I have to say arguably, he was the best cornerbacks coach in the country. I think is fair to say that. I mean, the technique development we saw, and how many times did guys make plays? And Brock, Josh, whoever was there, hey, tell me about that. Oh yeah, Klink, practice. How many times did they say Klink taught me to do that or told me this play was going to happen, right? So you lose Minter, defensive back coordinated. You lose Klink. You lose Jay Harbaugh. You replace them with Wink, who is a front 7 guy, and Lamar Morgan, who I think is a good coach, and he's got some defensive coordinator experience. But now he's commanding the entire secondary when you used to have Minter, Klink, and Jay. Mm-hmm. So, hey, maybe this is why we're seeing some secondary issues, right? Some of the cover zero calls, and we can get into some of the X's and O's stuff. There's more to it, but I think that's a big piece of it. I think Lou is doing a great job, and we're not shocked by that. I don't know what I think about Brian John Marie yet. I mean, it is what it is. And again, I'm not in a position to make a bunch of, what do you want to call it? Huge proclamations on anybody's job, but like, obviously something didn't work with the fit over there. Jim Harbaugh had to make that decision too, right? That's what 2021 was all about. Firing Ed Warner to promote Sherrone Moore to the offensive line coach, right? Getting rid of Zordich, getting rid of some guys. And I think that too, maybe not, again, not necessarily with calling for people, but in terms of what I think he needs. Jim Harbaugh had Biff Poggi, which I think was really, really important to have that right-hand man. He also had Sherrone Moore. right? Who we've talked about, a big reason he got this job is because he was head coach 1B, right? He was basically like the other head coach in this program. Same thing with Herbert in the offseason. Jim was able to spend a lot of time with quarterbacks, even though he was the head coach. I think Sherrone Moore needs somebody in some role that allows him to be the head coach, but also focus on the offensive line. Because I think Grant Newsome might be fine, but it's clear the drop off there has been significant. And that's so much of the identity of this team, this program, the continuity piece we talked about, but even more, whatever Sherrone Moore wants this program to be under him, even if it changes, it's still going to be about the offensive line. So I think you've got to bring in people, whether it's with head coach experience or, just someone he can trust. Maybe that is literally Bob Stoops or Charlie Strong or some of these other guys that he's played for, coached under. That'll get, I think about Juwan Howard early on, the benefit he had of having Phil Martelli around, right? Something that's going to allow him to be himself, because he just hasn't felt himself in this new iteration of the team, So I don't know. Again, that's thinking way ahead, but for this year, this is still a really talented football team, right? Like you're better than Washington. You lost, you lost to a team that you're better than, and that was a big thing with Harbaugh pre-2021. You can't do that. And I know where Michigan's head is at in terms of the fans, where this fan base is at right now. And Brock, you kind of touched on it already. You've gone to Illinois and struggled in the past. Are you going to lose that one? Are you going to lose to Indiana, who you've lost to once in 30 years or whatever? Are you going to lose that? And of course, I've already seen it in the comments, the Sparty game. You can't lose that game.
Oh.
You can't, because they had a similar situation with their coaching changes. They've had a nightmare with their NIL that was shut down in the middle of last season and still hasn't recovered. That roster was decimated. It is not as good as your roster. If Jonathan Smith comes in and outcoaches you and wins, it was so similar to 2020. All the COVID excuses you want to make for Harbaugh, MSU had him too, and worse. And you lost that game. That's why I said for the longest time I thought that was the worst loss of Harbaugh's career. You can't lose that game.
Yep.
You can't. And then, I don't know what conversation we're having if you do, but someone's got to step up. I think it's got to be players. It was nice to see Donovan. I don't know what it was like, Brock, in the stadium when Donovan kind of assembled that players-only meeting.
I didn't notice.
You didn't even see it?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't notice. No.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a big deal. We talked about it a little bit this offseason, Josh, but maybe not enough. I think the leadership void on this team from a player standpoint, the loss of Rod Moore is significant. He's the guy that I think would be on this defense screaming, "You're out of position."
Yeah.
Pointing guys out, move over. I think that's been just massive. There's no Mike Sainer still from a leadership standpoint on this roster. There's no Michael Barrett. There's no Blake Corum. There's no JJ McCarthy, Keegan, Zinter. Brock, you've been to a lot of these press conferences, and I'm reading transcripts and I'm looking at the audio. They don't say. They've been under this program for so many years. They knew all the right things to say. They were well coached at the podium and on the field. And they're just not now, and it's missing, and it's just a massive void.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you lay it out like that. Your average fan says in the comments they could realistically miss a bowl game, and if things can continue on this trend, that's not out of the question. Like I said earlier, I think Northwestern is a game you're going to win. But you're not guaranteed to win any of the other 5. And do I think they'll beat Michigan State? Probably. Do I think they'll win probably one of 2 against Indiana and Illinois? Yeah. And at that point, you're looking at 7-5. But it's concerning. And Trevor, to your point earlier, when you said that Michigan lost to a team that was better than in Washington, I totally agree. And that might be what's most concerning for me in terms of where this program is headed, is that Washington was in a worse spot than Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Washington lost 20 of their 22 starters, totally raided the portal, brought in a new head coach, new coaching staff.
Well, and Fish didn't bring his best players from Arizona with him.
Right.
They didn't come with him. I mean, Will Rogers was a good addition. He had good additions, but like when a coach moves, their best coaches, their best players come with. He didn't have that.
Yep.
Sorry, Rob.
It's all right. And everyone talks about how Sherrone Moore was in a tough spot having to replace so much, and everyone gets mad at Jim Harbaugh for rating the coaching staff and this and that. That makes me really mad. Jim Harbaugh doesn't owe anyone at Michigan anything.
That's fair.
He won them a national championship, and he can do whatever he wants. His goal now is to go and win a Lombardi trophy in the NFL. And if he wants to take Jesse Minter and Mike Elston and all these guys, then he can do that. It's his right. But Michigan was in a far better spot this offseason than Washington was. And to go there and lose that game is it's really alarming. And like you said, Trevor, if they go and lose at home to Michigan State, a team that was in a very similar position to Washington. I mean, maybe not that extreme. They weren't as good last year and didn't lose, I guess, as many starters and things like that. But very similar. If you go and get beat by a team that you're clearly more talented than, and have that happen for the second time in the same season, where these new coaches are coming in and beating a more talented Michigan team, it'll be very alarming. And listen, I think Sherrone Moore, like you said, Trevor, is the right guy for the job. But if they end up losing that game, that might be after 49-0 last year, the very next year going in and losing that game, all the pressure will be on Michigan. I mean, if they lose that, I think you got to have serious like identity crisis talks about this Michigan team. You got to really look inward. You got to look at Sherrone Moore, and you got to figure out what's wrong, because you cannot go and lose to your second most hated rival after beating them 49-0 at their stadium last year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to make sure my point earlier is clear. I don't blame Jim Harbaugh for doing what he did. I think in hindsight, telling Moore you had to be this continuity hire after that happened probably wasn't fair, right? Like the continuity was over at that point. It is with him and the culture, and I think he's done a good job of walking that line of, look, we know what's successful. Don't break it, don't fix it. But I'm also going to be my own guy and blah, blah. I think he's done a good job of walking that line so far. But yeah, from a staff, and I know, look, Josh, you and I know because we covered it. He took some big swings on some coaches that look, it's hard to hire dudes in February. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we'll see. Again, that's maybe further down the road, because you still have this year. Trying to think where else I was going with this. I don't know. It's so overwhelming because I think, the framing of this entire offseason, I went on a bunch of different shows and people asked me, what's people's patience level going to be with this program? And I said, look, there's going to be a couple segments, right? Older folks like me, I'm still on the Natty high, man. Like Charles Woodson's over my shoulder right here, right? I was 12 when that happened. I had no idea I was going to wait almost 30 years for it to happen again. I didn't know dudes don't just win Heisman's for your team all the time. I remember the Lloyd years where really good teams failed to reach expectations. Obviously, Rich, Rod, Hoke, the early Harbaugh years, whatever. But I also get in this era. Look, Nick Saban, even Ohio State to a point, like have built these dynasties. So it's like once you win one, go win 6, right? You got to be able to sustain that. But I said, look, you can go 9-3. You might even be able to go 8-4. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily even going to be losing. It's going to be how you lose. And that's exactly what we're seeing this year. That's the glaring thing that's really, I think, frustrating the fan bases. Look, Texas is the best team in the country. And I think people were able to justify that once they were like, okay, we're not winning. This isn't the same Natty team. Fine. Letting Minnesota claw back in. Your backups are not, but like Arkansas State making a run late, right? Losing this game now on the road to Washington because you're the team running out of gas in the fourth quarter. You're the team with the dumb penalties. You're the team making the turnovers. You're the team making the mistakes and being out of position and look clueless, right? It's just already a complete 180. So David's right. It's one game at a time. I know we're thinking big picture because you're fans, and you're thinking of all these upcoming games. You're nervous about losing that MSU game, right?
Well,
Like,
and that's also the benefit of having a bye week. You can kind of afford
yeah,
to look ahead. Kind of afford to look ahead and kind of look big picture while we have a chance. Because there's not a game to kind of prepare for this weekend. So,
yeah.
look, I mean, you win against Illinois, a top 25 team. You kind of get some of the bad taste out of your mouth a little bit. Obviously, one win doesn't fix everything, but you get the one win, and then whether you compound that into another, or you
That's
kind
what
of
USC felt like, right?
yeah, it did.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
And honestly,
maybe Tuttle is the answer.
all you had to do, you could have won this game as ugly as possible, and you were up 17-14 in the third quarter.
Right.
If you could get to the bye week 5-1, how
Yeah,
much does that change how we're talking right now?
Yeah, you're sitting in a really good spot at 5-1, but yeah. I mean, the next week, I feel like it's going to be like this every week, but next week is going to be the big tell of kind of how they're going to respond. And then that leads up to the discussion the week after. How are they going to respond to either a win, or how are they going to respond to another loss coming out of a bye? So at this point, it's just going to come down to resolve and in response, and how this team kind of looks at each other, and I don't even know what the right wording is. Just kind of looks at each other and how they answer. Yeah, it's gut check. It's a gut check time heading into Illinois. I still think these are winnable games coming up. These are winnable games, and these games that Michigan should be winning. Even this assembled team should be winning these games. Should have won Saturday against Washington. Can definitely win against Indiana.
This team should be
Can definitely win
9-3
against Illinois. Yeah. So it's just how are they going to respond is the big thing. And you're either going to be highly, highly disappointed, or you're going to be shown something. I don't know what that is, but you're going to be shown something. So
yeah, in the short-term picture, if we're taking the microscope to the season and not talking about the big picture of things, the bye week comes at a great time. Not only just because it's a reset halfway through the season, but Michigan is banged up. There were 15.
I was gonna say, yeah.
There were 15 guys on the availability report.
Crazy.
Last week.
that was insane.
3 starters were out: Derek Moore, Miles Hinton, and Dominic Giudice. And Will Johnson was questionable. I mean, they're just banged up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that it comes at a good time to be able to reset. You go into Illinois potentially healthy. It doesn't seem like any of these injuries are too long-term, except for Jaden McBurrows, who I think Josh, you reported is out for the year.
Yeah, that's what the word is. I would be shocked if Hinton played next weekend, but I don't think he's long term, but I would be shocked if he played.
Coach speak is fine, but stop telling me somebody could have gone back in if you needed him.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't ever. I am defending Sherrone Moore in almost everything. Stop saying that.
Yeah.
Because 1, then why weren't they back out there? You needed them.
Yeah.
2, why are they out the next game? I'm not telling you got to disclose injury information to me. Don't say that.
Yeah.
Will Johnson's still hurt. You can tell. Colston Loveland's still hurt.
He's got a lingering. The thing with Will Johnson,
a lot of people have stuff lingering at this point of the year. That's fine, but like
I'm not gonna share what's up with Will Johnson, but
yeah,
he's got something that he can play with that is just gonna linger. until he gets it taken care of.
There's a couple guys that aren't on the injury report that are dealing with that as well.
Right.
That we know about, right? Like I get it. And honestly, I don't want to say you could make excuses for the injury. I mean, they're significant.
Mhm.
Your left tackle, your best offensive lineman was gone. Your best
Yep.
target at tight end is limited. He's not playing full snaps. Will John, like these injuries are significant, but there's nothing happening in these games that make me feel like, oh, if they would have just had blank.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I've seen this team, and I know it's not the same team. Okay, I know, but like again, if we're talking about continuity, next man up, blah blah blah, you won a national championship without Zach Zinner.
Mhm.
You beat Ohio State without Blake Corum, without Will Johnson late, without Zach Zinner again, right? The year before, JJ McCarthy was banged up at Penn State. You didn't even throw the ball in the second half. You know what I mean? You found a way to win. And we said on how many of these shows, fans, stop pretending you were comfortable every Saturday. How many wins were we miserable after? It was boring. It was conservative. It was frustrating. They didn't do this enough, blah, 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 you know, but they won. And Moore said that earlier in the year. We don't care. A W is a W, you know. Well, now that's not happening. And you're losing late. You're getting out coached. You're getting outplayed. You're getting outworked, man. That's the frustrating part, you know. So,
well, and going back to your point too, Trevor, about
horse. I'm not even the QB portal thing, that horse, but
going back to your point, Trevor, about that, about Sherrone Moore saying that guys could have gone back in. I mean, Will Johnson was out late in the USC game, and USC is driving down the field,
right,
about to take the lead.
Yeah.
And Sherrone Moore says, "Oh, Will could have gone back into the game."
Then what would have needed to happen for Will Johnson to go back in that game?
It's like all right, Sherrone, USC just took the lead, and now you've got to rely on Khalil Mullins to save you, and he did, and he's lucky he did, or else they'd be 3-3 right now. But it's like that's another concerning thing with his coaching staff is they're just they make some weird remarks. And clearly the product on the field is not there. But saying that Will Johnson could have gone back into the game when
and missed the next
close
game.
as it was, it's bizarre.
I think look, we're coming off a lot of years of covering Jim Harbaugh. Coaches say weird things all the time. They're just magnified when you're not winning, or you don't look good, right? More when he announced Orji was going to start on the Monday before the USC game, and people lost their mind. Why would you say it publicly or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, this is just not something we'd be nitpicking in a different situation, you know? But anyway, and look, the injuries, Amir Hall would have been really nice to have Saturday.
Yeah, no kidding. He would have been great.
You know, when Hill was getting picked on. So look, I know the injuries are part of it, but if it would have been that, right? Like if it would have been like, man, you just didn't have the bodies, or you know what, we went 1-on-1, we went 11 versus 11, and they just had a little bit more. Okay, but again, we're seeing dudes falling down, we're seeing busted coverages, we're seeing you blitz and leaving 2 defenders when there's 3 receivers, you're playing 15 yards off soft coverage on 3rd and 6. Like there's just so many weird things that it's like, I don't know if it mattered which player was out there. It's execution, you know? So it's hard to sit here and be like, oh, the injuries. You know, I get it. There's been some significant ones. I know it's part of the formula. You still should have beat Washington. You shouldn't have let Minnesota get that close, right? Like that's just a fact, regardless of what you're dealing with. So, but look, defensively, like there's enough here. You've got Josiah Stewart, who's arguably still the best pass rusher analytically in college football. Will Johnson, I don't know what some people are talking about. Like the dude was targeted 4 times, gave up 1 reception. Like he's still unbelievable. He's never given up a touchdown. Like, I don't know. The Mason Graham, Kenneth Graham, like the pieces are there to, even if you go to just like a crazy basics approach, you should, like you said, Brock, you got to win these. You should be able to win these football games. You should be able to. So, all right. I mean, quick. We're all in agreement. Tuttle's the dude at this point.
Yep.
I mean, where are you expectations wise now? I mean, Is it 7-5 and dropping in Indiana and Illinois, MSU, something like that? Like where do you feel like things are headed for the rest of this year?
I feel like 8-4 now. I mean, 8-4, and you just have to hope that they're competitive against Oregon and Ohio State, and they're not totally just blown off the field. Yeah, I mean, I feel like 8-4 is being a little generous coming off what we just saw Saturday, but I still think there's a lot of untapped potential with this Michigan team offensively where they can win some games. But I mean 8-4 isn't gonna make anyone all happy and give something to write home about. I mean, it's not a great year. It pretty much meant that Michigan. Well, I can't even say Michigan won games they were supposed to win because they really should have won that game on Saturday. So, look, it's 8-4 right now is kind of, I guess, the ceiling for me.
Because if you're not going to give them Oregon or Ohio State, then that's winning every other game.
Yep.
If you steal one against Oregon or Ohio State, you could make the argument for playoffs, considering just how much chaos there's going on. I mean,
this has been a wild season already.
9-3 is maybe good enough to scratch the
playoffs
because you've beaten a top 10. You've beaten
talk about playoffs.
Well, essentially a top 5 team, Oregon or Ohio State. You're beating a top 5 team, and one of your losses is to the number 1 team overall in the country. You can make an argument that the playoffs could be in the picture, but
in that scenario,
9-3 would be the ultimate ceiling. 8-4,
that'd be pretty awesome.
Big deal. I mean, 8-4 is kind of just whatever. 7-5 is even worse.
If you're 9-3 and you split Oregon and Ohio State, I'm elated at this point.
Yeah.
So, Brock, you've been lower than most since the jump. So,
yeah, I know last week I was very optimistic about the team for the rest of the season, but I think every bit of that optimism that I had last week is now gone. I mean,
left in Seattle.
Yeah, for reasons we've all already touched on. But like I said earlier, I think this team can do no better than 8-4. They're not going to beat Ohio State. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon either. And I think they'll drop one of the games against Illinois or Indiana. I think like I said, they'll beat Northwestern, and I do think they'll beat Michigan State. But I think they'll lose to either Illinois or Indiana. I don't know which will be. Both games are on the road, so it's not like one's at home and I would just pick the one that's on the road. But both games are on the road. I think they'll drop one, and I think they'll finish 7-5 and go to the Duke's Mayo Bowl or something, and maybe we can see
the PP Bowl. Can't wait.
I don't know. It's crazy what's happened, and it's frustrating too to think that a team with at least 2, if not 3, top 10 draft picks goes 7-5. But I guess that's exactly what I'm predicting at this point. I think you're going to have, Mason Graham and Will Johnson are going to be top 10 picks, and I think Kenneth Grant could be too. And obviously Colston Loveland will be in the first round. This team has 4 first-round draft picks. And
Josiah Stewart might play his way into one too at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I'm predicting a team with 4 first-round draft picks to go 7-5.
Yeah, I think to your average fan comment here, I think that Michigan State game is going to set football back about 15 years.
It could be ugly.
That's going to be a horrific game. It's going to make me just puke all over myself.
I don't think it's that crazy. We've seen really good football teams have bad records in the past. Lincoln Riley at this point is already on a hot seat at USC, which, you go 7-5 with a Heisman winner and Caleb Williams, you probably should be the year before already. You know what I mean? But so I can see some of that. You guys can say and do whatever you want, as far as the Michigan fan base goes. But I would say, like the comment about Will thinking about Will, I don't really. I mean,
I don't.
what we know about these players, we what they're playing through injury. I mean, they all could have checked out already.
Will, yeah, exactly right. If Will was thinking about Will, he would have done what like a bunch of other guys have done right now.
There's guys already doing that.
Peace, and then just dip out and not play for the rest of the year.
And I say this all the time. I promise you, you are not more upset than the players. You are not having a harder time than they are right now. Like, this isn't a caring problem, right? There were some diva issues in the 2017 through 20 era. That's not what this is. And you know what? If a time comes after a couple more losses or something where some of these guys do decide that they're going to go ahead and shut it down, okay. Honestly, I mean, they won a natty. What do they owe this program at this point? If they're looking at a 6-6 or something crazy like that, I think that's crazy. But yeah, expectations. The reason I was optimistic going into this week was because of some of the things that were said, right? In terms of the wake up call. And I think this is probably going to happen maybe after a loss as well. They figured something out with the running game. I think they kind of did more of a hot hand approach in this last game, which I didn't love. Brock knows I am obsessed with my running back 1-2 theory in terms of how to use Mullings and Edwards. I think it works. I just do it. The receivers, we've talked about it a million times. I'm running out of ideas. You got to stop rotating dudes. Just pick a couple, go with it. When Loveland's healthy, that's going to help. When your offensive line, when Hinton comes back, Crippen might be the dude now. Finally, no more rotation. Like, there's a lot of things that could help on the offense and defensively too. Wink has made good adjustments post Texas. That makes me feel confident about the games they should win. I'm with you though. Oregon, Ohio State, there's just no way at this point. There's not. I thought if you could have gone 5-1 into this bye, 7-1 now into Oregon, win or lose that game, I think you're coming into Columbus with a different mindset if you only have 2 losses, right? And that would have changed everything. That's not going to happen anymore. There are things with Ohio State I was very wrong on. Their offensive line has improved. I do think there's still some gaps in their defense, but overall it's really, really good. And look, Jeremiah Smith, I said, look, you guys are going to count on a freshman receiver after you had Olave and JSN and Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison. He's the best receiver in college football.
Yeah.
He's too young to know how good he is.
I don't know. Ryan Williams has
another 17-year-old. Fine. But I mean, the one-handed grabs and the stuff these dude is doing is crazy, man. So yeah, I think 9-3 is obviously the ceiling to me at this point, and I'd be elated by it. But I'm probably with Brock 8-4. I think you're going to lose Illinois or Indiana. I hope Sparty doesn't think this is an insult. I do think Jonathan Smith has done a really good job this year. That roster was decimated. That defense looks better, right? They had effort issues in the past. That's not the case anymore. I like Aiden Childs. I think he has potential to be good. He is the most turnover risk quarterback in college football right now. I just talked about Tuttle, the 9.1 against Washington. Over the season, Aiden Childs is 8% of his throws are turnover worthy. 15 turnover worthy plays. That is literally double the second worst, who has 7. Wow. Right? He's got 9 picks, 5 touchdowns. Like, the guy's trying to make plays left and right. And, again, I think he could get there. It's not there yet. That's why this game could be really ugly. We get 3 or 4 turnovers for both sides potentially in that Michigan State.
Yeah. I think this weekend proved a lot, like just from a national scope, that anything can happen on any given weekend. But I'm not going to say there's absolutely no shot Michigan can win against Oregon and Ohio State. I mean, of course there is a chance, but it's going to take an awful lot to go right. Upsets like we saw over the weekend don't happen every weekend, but it proves that, any given Saturday, the fortunes could totally change. So, I'm not going to sit here and say Michigan has absolutely 0% chance of
Yeah.
of beating Oregon or beating Oregon and Ohio State. I mean, yes, of course, there's a chance.
Yeah, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Things happen. You're 100% right. Yeah.
But Vanderbilt did beat Alabama because of their quarterback. So Michigan's quarterback play is going to have to be a whole hell of a lot better than what it's been now.
Just got to go get a dude that pees on his rival's logo.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
I know. I didn't know it was the same dude. I connected the dots. Like, that's wild.
Post that story on the timeline. I'm like, oh
yeah.
my God, that's the same
why
guy.
didn't we go get him? I'm like, oh, that's why. Don asked, are both Illinois and Indiana better than Washington? Depending on what analytical thing or whatever metric you prefer, the one that I prefer says Indiana is better than Washington, and Illinois is not. But Indiana is arguably a top 15 team at this point in terms of some of their opponent adjusted metrics. I mean, Kurt Spaghetti, dude. Props. I thought he came off like kind of a jerk, honestly. Yeah. I was like, okay, I get it. You wanted James Madison, blah, blah, blah. But okay, dude.
Yeah.
Back it up, man.
I'd still like to see him play a team with a
I know.
You know, I mean, wow, he beat Northwestern.
I know, but like I said, dude, there's opponent adjusted metrics. There's ways to look at this. Yeah. Did you have him 6-0 to start the year? I didn't.
Yeah, well, you know, when you play FIU in Western Illinois and Charlotte, I mean, you know, all miracles can't happen.
We'll see. I'm with you. I see both sides of it for sure. But
I mean, they play Ohio State. I believe it's the week after. Oh, they have a bye week. No, they play Ohio State in Columbus on November 23rd. Yeah. That is their only, outside of Michigan, that's their only ranked game so far. Obviously, that can change because they play Nebraska this weekend, or excuse me, next weekend, and then Washington the weekend after that, and then Michigan State, and then Purdue. So,
but you know what? You got to play the teams on your schedule.
Yeah.
Like, dude, they're like Purdue, Michigan State, Nebraska, Washington, Ohio State. Like, even if you give them 3 losses there, it's 9-3, dude. That's pretty good.
Yep.
But no, Oregon isn't a hot place in November either. Yeah. I know I've said this too. Like, I like that Oregon's coming to Ann Arbor. Yeah, the Pacific Northwest isn't LA, obviously, but would I rather play here or there? Obviously, glad they're coming here. But yeah, so all right, look, we're gonna continue to have, you know, fallout coverage and things from the Washington game going into the bye week. Probably be a little light, and some things will pick up, you know, next week when we get back into football mode. But also for those of you that are maybe ready for a distraction. Other sports are kicking in. Hockey season obviously has gotten started. Our hockey coverage is going to start to pick up. Basketball season is right around the corner. And if you are someone who believes in the Michigan basketball and football ecosystem, right, that one's high, the other's low, and vice versa, it's looking like it might be a really good year for Dustin. So,
yeah,
go Wings. Absolutely, man. Get back in the playoffs. Give me some hockey playoffs to go with this baseball playoffs we've been so lucky to have. My God.
Yeah, we've been spoiled last couple of weeks for sure. Now, I would say last like month and a half.
That run, the Tigers, unbelievable. Yeah. Well, yeah, so please, like I always say, thank you for, you know, joining us here. Hail to the podcast. If you're listening back on a playback, make sure you're liking, subscribing, notification bell so you know when we go live. And when Dennis goes live, his shows this season, I don't know if it's just his experience being in radio and having to cover bad teams, whether you want to or not. Like, that dude's coverage when things aren't great is amazing. Dennis, we're so lucky to have him, man. What those guys do on Good Afternoon Michigan Football, and then Scar coming on, and obviously his film review has just been awesome. So if you're not watching that already, make sure you are. Dennis does a great job, and obviously he's going to kick into post-game coverage for basketball too when that starts going. And then michigan.rivals.com. Make sure you're on the site, access to our message board, premium content as well. If you're not a subscriber already, you can use promo code BLUE30. Give the first month a try. Ask our subscribers what they think, if it's worth sticking around. It's It's a sad place right now. Right. Yeah. Don't come in blazing. Right. Introduce yourself calmly. Guys are a little sad over there right now. But the Den, it's a good place to hang out if you're not there already. I don't even. I'm so bad at logging off, Henry. And then you ask me this great question: do you see Evan Link as a guard? His run blocking is so much better than his pass blocking. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think his size and footwork might be awkward at guard, but I don't know. Wait a minute.
That's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you said it is what it is?
No, I haven't today. I haven't. Because it's not what it is right now.
I should have figured out a way to get it out of you. I'm mad about that. And then my usual Circuit City reference dropper isn't here, so things just aren't right.
No,
they're just not right.
There's a disturbance in the force somewhere. We gotta figure it
out. No game next week. It's not even what it was. Oh, Don.
bars.
Oh, dropping. That should have been the name of this show, this episode.
Not even what it was. My gosh.
Oh, we got to end on that.
That's good. That is
we
quality.
got to end on that. Beautiful.
Quality.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week talking about whatever we're talking about. Hail to the podcast.